4,500 years ago. Northern Europe is slowly emerging from the Stone Age. In the Mediterranean, the roots of two great civilizations, Greece and Rome, have yet to take hold. In Mesopotamia, the mighty empire of Assyria is still far in the future. But to the south, on the northeast tip of Africa, something unparalleled in antiquity is taking place. Rising from the banks of the Nile River in Egypt are three colossal pyramids, monuments to the most enduring civilization the world would ever see. When the Greek historian Herodotus visited Egypt 4.5 centuries before the birth of Christ, he was awestruck. The wonders were greater than those of any other land, he observed. There were pyramids taller than any man-made structures on Earth. Avenues of sphinxes, half man, half beast. And towering stone pillars called obelisks. There were giant statues of long-dead pharaohs. And exotic mummies encased in gold. And everywhere, the enigmatic symbols of its sacred writing. Here, reaching across the chasm of time, was a civilization that had flourished for more than 3,000 years. To the ancients, Egypt was already ancient. Cleopatra, who ruled during the 1st century BC, is closer in time to us than she is to the pharaohs who built the pyramids. Egypt is so old that for centuries its origins remained shrouded in mystery. Even the Egyptians weren't really sure how old they were or where they came from. Herodotus said Egypt was the gift of the Nile. But the Egyptians knew from the beginning that life on the Nile could be precarious. Isolated by an endless expanse of desert, vulnerable to a river that was unpredictable, and a climate that could dramatically change, civilization in Egypt was forged in part by the realities of a harsh environment. The Egyptians called it chaos. Lurking in the background were powerful forces waiting to be unleashed. Because disaster could strike at any moment, the Egyptians clung to a profound belief. Order, not chaos, was the will of the gods. To maintain order and keep chaos at bay, the Egyptians envisioned a king who was a living god, the earthly manifestation of Horus the hawk, ruler of the skies. Pitted against him was the unruly god Seth, the harbinger of chaos. The eternal conflict between order and chaos would ultimately guide the destiny of Egyptian civilization. But the true story of how it came about vanished in antiquity. In the twilight of Egypt's greatness, around 300 BC, a priest named Manetho began the awesome task of compiling the first complete history of Egypt. The challenge would have been daunting, yet in temple libraries and on the walls of Egypt's most sacred places, volumes had already been written. A 1,000 years before Manetho was born, the pharaoh Seti I built a temple at Abydos dedicated to Osiris, the god of the dead. In a special Hall of the Ancestors, his son, the future Ramesses II, is shown reading from a papyrus. The document, carved on the wall in hieroglyphs, contains a list of 76 royal names in chronological order. Each name is encircled by a stylized coil of rope. The symbol, called by Egyptologists a cartouche, identifies a king. Together, the kings ruled over 2,000 years of Egyptian history. Using temple documents such as these, Manetho organized his history into 30 royal dynasties. The earliest name on the list is Mene. King Mene founded Egypt's first dynasty about 3100 BC. According to Manetho, he reigned for 60 years, during which he expanded Egypt's borders and won great acclaim before being carried off by a hippopotamus. Before King Mene, Egypt was ruled by demigods called the spirits of the dead, but their names were long forgotten. Were the spirits of the dead history or mythology? Where did Egyptian civilization really begin? Ironically, not along the banks of the Nile. "70 miles west of the Nile in the Sahara Desert, it's so hot and dry, what little rain that falls evaporates before it hits the ground.